This is Pro Football Perspective. I am Nathaniel Bradley. Whether you're at home, work, the gym, in your car, or wherever you are, thanks for taking time out of your day to spend here. Pro Football Perspective is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and YouTube. And of course, be sure to follow on Instagram at Pro Football Perspective. What's happening? Big announcement right at the top of the show here. Get ready for it. Brace. Pro Football Perspective will be welcoming its first guest on our next episode. That's right. I've got somebody lined up here, an NFL PA certified agent, to discuss various topics, take a bit of a peek behind the curtain of what an agent does on the daily. So look for that coming soon on our next episode. Now, for today's episode, I'm going to nudge those statistical deep dives ever so slightly to the side and introduce the common sense analysis portion of this podcast. This is what I hope becomes a regular segment of the show. If you remember from our inaugural episode, I stated that one of the goals of this podcast would be to provide perspective and an equal and opposite reaction to the hot takes that are present out there in popular media. So each week, I will scour the interwebs for some of the NFL-related opinions voiced on popular talking head debate types of shows and determine if those opinions are based in reality or if they are just ratings fodder and producer-driven overreaction hot takes. I am open to suggestions on the samples I select from, but for now, I'm mainly looking at First Take, Get Up, First Things First, Undisputed, and The Herd. Now, I said a moment ago I will scour, kind of in air quotes, the interwebs to try and find a hot take when the truth is that between those 5 shows, I don't really have to spend too much time looking. I spend way more time deciding which one to look at. So now, to be clear, I'm not going to blast every single opinion because some of them have merit. These shows are not my enemy. Trust me, if they were, I would destroy them. But in all seriousness, they're very entertaining shows for a sports fan. I watch them in doses here and there, but it's important to remember that for the most part, their content is rooted in hyperbole. It's entertainment. It's not necessarily news. It's really not necessarily analysis. This is like just sports gossip. We'll call it that, okay? So you can't expect level-headed experts to make their fair evaluations composed of data and common sense across a wide variety of sports topics. You could barely make that a show that would work once a week, let alone every single day, 5 days a week, all year. It just doesn't work. It's not volatile enough. On the other hand, it's very, very doable to have pseudo-experts and pseudo-journalists make definitive pound-your-fist-on-the-table statements on the same 10 subjects 5 days a week and have these outlandish reactions to any kind of differing opinion in the slightest. That's a show that works, and it's evidenced by its repeated duplication across multiple networks. So I enjoy them for entertainment value because that is their aim, and hey, I'll go ahead and milk that entertainment value for some of my own content. How's that? Admittedly, I'm not so good with names, so the interim name for this segment will be Reality Retakes. I came up with it myself, my staff and I. So this past week on The Herd with Colin Cowherd, he was in the midst of reacting to the news of Derek Carr signing a contract extension with the Las Vegas Raiders. During his reaction, he kind of casually mentions that he believes there are 12 quarterbacks in the NFL that can win a Super Bowl. And he clarifies that he does in fact mean win a Super Bowl, not just get to a Super Bowl. So in no particular order, he lists off Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Tom Brady, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Matthew Stafford, Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow, Derek Carr, and Deshaun Watson. Then he preemptively mentions that Kirk Cousins and Dak Prescott are good, but are the ones that are elevated by teammates, rather than the reverse with these other 12 guys. Those 12 guys elevate their teammates. Okay, so Cousins and Prescott are carried by their teammates versus the 12 guys Colin mentions carry their teammates. He also states that some of the guys on the list he wouldn't necessarily classify as favorites to win the Super Bowl, but they are in fact capable. So his reasoning, he says, is they have to be able to carry a team and they have to elevate their teammates. That's who's capable of winning a Super Bowl. So surface level, it's not an awful take, really. There are certainly worse opinions out there. That's a good group of players. Yeah, the teams that these quarterbacks play for could win a Super Bowl. Mahomes, Rodgers, Wilson, Brady, and Stafford have all won a Super Bowl already, so that makes sense. They've done it before. The rest of the list are clearly top flight talents. So does that qualify them to win this upcoming season? Yes and no. Yes, it does qualify them to win this upcoming season. Does it qualify them based off of Colin's reasoning? That's what I want to focus on here, is how did he come to this conclusion and why it's wrong, okay? Hang on, Colin. Maybe someday we can grab a cup of coffee. So Colin contradicts his own reasoning by putting his faith in highlights and not reality. If you're going by, who can elevate teammates and who can carry a team, Colin says these guys are great. These individuals are great enough to do that. And the team results ought to bear that out. For some, the results do bear that out. Others, not so much. So Rodgers and Mahomes have the best overall era-adjusted production scores of the last two seasons. I'm bringing this up because they got to be pretty darn good if they're going to carry their team and elevate their teammates, okay? That's why I'm bringing up a couple of numbers. I won't go too deep, just a couple of numbers, okay? So Rodgers and Mahomes, they have the best overall era-adjusted, quarterback passing production scores for the last two seasons of the group. Rodgers, 124. That's video game level. And Mahomes at 114. Then Brady scores just under 113, and then Watson scores just over 112 for the last two seasons he played, at least. Okay, not necessarily, this past season, but the last two seasons in which he played. 7 of the other 8 guys on Colin's list have overall scores between 105 and 109 over the last two seasons, meaning they are giving you better than league average for sure. Yes, they are better than league average. But scoring between 105 and 109 doesn't scream, whoa, this guy is carrying the team type level production. Lamar Jackson's overall era-adjusted production score for the last two seasons is 98.83, ever so slightly below the league average. But, I completely and totally understand Jackson brings way more to the table outside of passing. So I'm not knocking that score because the guy has massive value as a rusher. Same goes for Kyler Murray, Josh Allen, even Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, and Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers to an extent. So I get it. There's more to being a quarterback than just the passing efficiency. But 3/4 of this group are not setting the league on fire compared to their peers in terms of passing. And if they can carry a team and elevate their teammates, I expect them to be setting the league on fire. So that runs contrary to the popular narrative and Colin's narrative. That there are 10 to 12 quarterbacks that can carry a team and elevate their teammates and win a Super Bowl. Essentially, there's 10 to 12 future Hall of Famers. The reality is that fans, media, former players, even I myself fall into this category sometimes, we're fooled, okay? We are fooled by a combination of highlights and faulty comparison points. So we compare the 3 or 4 wow plays of a game. Why do we do that? An offense is on the field, roughly 70 plays a game, maybe 65 plays a game. We take 4 wow plays and say, whoa, that guy did what? So that skews our perception of the player because they can do that, but are they really doing it on a consistent basis? The other thing that skews our perspective is we compare counting stats from 30 or even 20 years ago. And that's going to make a ton of QBs today seem otherworldly. But of the guys that Colin mentions by name, there are actually only 6 that have passing efficiency, era adjusted scores that are 10% or better above the league average. That's Rodgers, Mahomes, Brady, Watson, and ironically, Prescott and Cousins. Take that as you will. Maybe Colin knows that, and that's why he specifically mentioned those two. Now, individual passing efficiency isn't necessarily the key to determining who can carry a team and who can elevate their teammates, of course. So let's stick with Colin's reasoning here, because he didn't mention what their stats are. He just said, oh, I think they can carry a team. I think they can elevate their teammates. So let's stick with what Colin's saying here. Would Matt Stafford have been on this list before he landed on the Rams, according to Colin's line of thinking? Does Colin think that Stafford had the ability to elevate teammates and carry a team all along? Or did he only find that ability in himself when he landed on a better team with the LA Rams? I don't know what the answer to that is, because nobody asked Colin. So who knows? Must be nice to just go on a monologue, kind of like a certain someone I know doing a podcast. Nobody here to challenge me either, so I hear you, Colin. It's nice. I get where you're coming from. It's addicting. Now, what about Kyler Murray? Did he elevate his team, or did other players elevate him? I'm looking at you, DeAndre Hopkins. What about even the infallible Tom Brady? Did his ability to elevate teammates and carry a team simply evaporate his last season in New England when he had a bunch of no-names to throw the ball to, only to miraculously have that ability to elevate his teammates return to him when he landed in Tampa Bay, surrounded by top-shelf talent at every skill position? So what I'm getting at is Colin's reasoning doesn't really hold water. It's pretty mushy here. The list is meh, not bad, not great. His supposed criteria is what I'm critical of. I don't mind the list. Just tell me how you got there and make it logical and reasonable. Don't make it hogwash. That's right, I said it, hogwash. Bottom line is a team is capable of winning a Super Bowl because of a number of variables that have nothing to do with the quarterback. Sure, the quarterback is one of the variables, but let's be real. Even the most important player on the team with the greatest single instance of influence on wins and losses is still not as significant as we try to make it out to be when there are 22 other guys on the field at a time. Well, 21 other guys on the field at a time, we'll put it that way. And the quarterback is only on the field less than half of the total plays of the game. So let's not make it out to be like the quarterback is always, sometimes yes, but not always, are they the driving factor to a Super Bowl. Take a poll from the 2000 Ravens, or the 2001 Patriots, or the 2002 Bucks, or the 2005 Steelers, or the 2013 Seahawks, or the 2015 Broncos, or the 2017 Eagles, or any of the New York Giants Super Bowl teams. Shoot, I did it again. I threw shade at Eli. And this time I brought Phil Simms into it to boot. I didn't mean to. Just trying to make a point there, Eli. You had a great career. Seemed like a solid dude. Love watching you on the Manning cast. The point there is that there are plenty of teams that win the Super Bowl where the quarterback of the team would never be described as the primary reason they won. They won because they were a great team, period. Carry the team, elevate teammates. These are nonsense arguments based on nothing, period. Just a week earlier, Colin mentions his top 10 quarterback-coach combos, and it's the same group. He only left out Herbert and Brady. Anyway, basically Colin's grasping at straws here to, I don't know, come up with some type of foundation for what's just an opinion. I mean, that's fine. He should have just said, oh, these guys are the guys I like. I like the teams they play on. and that is our first reality retake. So feel free to comment on Instagram at Pro Football Perspective, YouTube or Apple Podcasts, Spotify or Amazon Music. If you think it's awesome, if you think it's terrible, or anywhere in between, I'd love the feedback on that. Now, moving forward here, we spent the last few weeks really exploring the nerd alert level depths of statistical analysis. And one evaluation after another can become a bit of a burden on the ears. And that's just one metric. That's right, I have more, everybody. They're coming. So I thought, after consulting with my staff of one, me, a unanimous decision was made that it would be a good idea to simply decompress and do a bit of a reaction episode. Everybody loves reactions, right? And discuss what we learned from the era-adjusted individual production statistics within the GOAT group. Before I go any further, though, this is the part where I remind you, if you haven't listened to the 3 episodes where I cover the era-adjusted production stats for the GOAT QBs, go ahead and hit pause, grab a snack, some refreshments, listen to those. I will be right here when you get back. Okay, cool. So what did we learn surface level? Well, we came out with rankings and we came out with overall scores. Both of those are cool. But the target I am aiming at here is that these figures could maybe give you, the listener, possibly some new information to incorporate into your NFL knowledge bank, or better yet, hopefully your actual process of how you look at NFL players going forward. No, I am not going to make an entire episode on every individual player or quarterback out there that might compare favorably or unfavorably to those that I had in my group. My group is my group. If there is a player that you think maybe is undervalued or overvalued, whether that's a current player or not, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at Pro Football Perspective or on YouTube or one of the podcast sites. And if a group of names seems to be coming up frequently, then I'd be happy to touch on the player and or players and see how they compare and stack up. All that is to say that it would be awesome and really make my day if this first metric and explanation of it for adjusted individual production gives you some type of newfound lens to look at players with. That would be cool. That's the goal here. And so if that happened, hooray, let's all congratulate one another for that. In terms of my own reaction to this first metric, I got to say that my biases toward reputation, eye test, recency, you name it, they all fooled me on some of these players. A few of these players, I wasn't surprised where they landed, but let's go through the surprises first. So who did I think was going to rank higher? For me personally, I fully anticipated Johnny Unitas to sit atop the mountain in terms of era-adjusted individual production. I really did. Maybe it's a personal bias or a bit of NFL mythology that has taken hold of me since I was a kid, but I never would have guessed he would rank 12th. Again, like ranking 12th, it's not like that's a huge knock or a diss to him or anything. I don't see that as a slight whatsoever, okay? It's just not what I was expecting, that's all. Other players I thought would have been higher on the list, Dan Marino at 10 and Peyton Manning at 6. I figured both would actually wind up in the top 5. And to be fair, Manning does rank in the top 5 in all but one of the variations of rankings we went over at the conclusion of our last episode. But Marino only reaches the top 5 when we didn't include 5 other QBs based off their longevity or the era they played in. So that was kind of shocking to me. I also thought Brady at number 11, Breeze at number 9, and Rodgers at number 8 all would have been a little bit higher. Maybe this is just recency bias and me being hyper-focused on quarterbacks over the last 5 years as every other NFL fan has been, because that's just the direction of the NFL as a production, and they're the stars of the show. And when you look at Rodgers and Brady, for that matter, they both do rank higher in the high-impact category only evaluations. But to be clear, I mean, for this metric, I never thought Brady would ever be near the top of this list because outside of 2007, I can't think of a season where he was head and shoulders above his peers in terms of individual production. But I still thought he might have been closer to like the number 6, number 8 range rather than number 11 where he landed. High impact categories, as I said, he wound up ranking much higher, and that actually matches more closely what my impression of him is. As for quarterbacks that were ranked higher than I thought they should be, so I figured these guys would come in at a lower ranking. I'm really at a loss because when I finished tabulating the stats and I saw Roger Staubach at number 5, Sammy Baugh at number 3, Steve Young at number 2, and Otto Graham at number 1, I didn't have the words. I was surprised. With Baugh and Graham, I was surprised to a lesser degree than with Staubach and Young because I thought, that initial era of football is just ripe for outliers of all kinds. But all 4 of these guys' rankings made me scratch my head and just go back and double check the numbers to make sure I didn't miss a decimal point somewhere. Steve Young really has this awkward place in our collective memories as Joe Montana's successor, though never reaching Joe Montana's heights. And I gotta say, I think the only reason we think of that is because we're looking at championships, which is fair. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It just should be noted that that's why we think of it that way, not because of the individual player. Just his team didn't win as many championships. That's all. But anyway, that was a pleasant surprise for me to see Young rank so high. Roger Staubach, I have always thought was undervalued, and I had a sneaky suspicion he would be ranked higher than, I guess what popular opinion is of him. But I didn't think it would be this high. Vast majority of casual fans, I think, maybe even serious NFL fans, they tend to put Staubach in the same category as Terry Bradshaw and Troy Aikman. Bradshaw is an easy comparison, of course, because they played at the same time and against one another in Super Bowls. And Aikman, because they're intertwined legacies as Dallas Cowboys quarterbacks that won Super Bowls. To me, I've always seen Staubach as a superior individual player to either of those two, either Bradshaw or Aikman. But I understand why those are used as comparison points. So, I went into this evaluation really thinking Staubach, era-adjusted stats. He's going to be in the number 12 to number 8 range out of 16 guys. Seeing him at number 5 was refreshing, reassuring, I guess, to my gut. There were a few players I thought ranked, I guess right around where I figured they would wind up when I selected the initial 16. Bradshaw, Elway, Starr, Favre, Warner, and Montana. So I figured Bradshaw, Elway, and Starr would be near the bottom of a metric like this because it measured individual production and efficiencies, okay? Favre also. It made sense to me that he'd be in the lower half of these 16 because despite his incredible counting stats, this metric measures efficiency also. And it has that great equalizer for any Brett Favre evaluation, which is, of course, the interception percentage metric. Kurt Warner, I thought he would be in the 7 to 10 range because he had some mind-blowing seasons to go with some head-scratching interceptions here and there. And then there's Joe Montana, ranking number 4 on the overall metric, but he does rank number 1 on the evaluations with only 10-plus seasons and modern era players included. And this was satisfying. I thought, okay, yeah, my gut and I guess the gut of every other casual football fan or serious football fan, we were right. Because he's great statistically and individually, not just championship, postseason, and team success. We tend to look at him that way, but Joe Montana could just get it done, statistically as well. So Joe Cool was cool to see at number 4, and as I said, number 1 on some of the other evaluations there. Now, no reaction to a top anything list would be complete without taking into account the potential snubs from the list. So plenty of great quarterbacks to choose from in the history of professional football, right? So names that myself and my staff kind of took a hard look at but decided to omit. Y.A. Tittle, Fran Tarkenton, Jim Kelly, Warren Moon, Troy Aikman, Jim Plunkett, Russell Wilson. All of these guys present great cases, and they have something unique maybe on their resume. But ultimately, I think whatever aspects might make these quarterbacks stand out, that particular aspect is probably better represented already by another player within the 16 I chose. Again, not a knock. It's just, hey, there's a cutoff somewhere. Just to satisfy anyone who's wondering, yes, Patrick Mahomes has been remarkable so far, and if there were not a 7-season qualifier, currently his era-adjusted individual production would put him third, just above Sammy Baugh and below Steve Young in this metric. Of the other quarterbacks I mentioned that I left off the GOAT group, Tarkenton scores the highest on this metric, but he would have ranked number 13 just behind Johnny Unitas, so it's not as though there would have been a significant disruption of the GOAT group by including those other players. So that's all I've got on this episode. Again, if there are some other players you'd like me to take a look at or discuss, feel free to bring it up on Instagram or YouTube or any of the podcast platforms. Thanks again for joining Pro Football Perspective. Don't forget to look for my interview with an NFLPA certified agent on our next episode coming soon. Again, Pro Football Perspective is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, and be sure to follow on Instagram @Pro Football Perspective. I'm Nathaniel Bradley. Deuces.